Thokozani Bukhosini. Today is Monday. Whoa! My screen is like clear. Uitziking le rush yaka ya khala is just jumping out on the screen. I'm Lerato with a new haircut, and I'm going to have a bit of a controversial topic today, but not really controversial. It's controversial by point of view. And I know that a lot of people, but what does this topic have to do with everything, But I will say that as dingaka, we've got to learn, or as spiritual people, we've got to learn from what is around us. And I got to ask myself so many questions. Because I just hang on. My husband is okay. I thought it was telling me my screen is blurred. All right, because he told me that last week's screen was blurred and it sucked. I know. So before we go anywhere, in unison. I hope to be able to bina today. But we'll see, because voice like actually today. All right, tarapatling. Lise di bon kholo bon tate moholo lona ba makobetse ba mtjali ba bogatso ba gotlwa ke le mema bon kholo bon tate mo le gotlong tsene tsa lefatshe bon kholo bon tate moholo ke na ngwana lona ke khanda lembo be ke na ngwana lona le rato gotlwa bon kholo bon tate moholo ke kopore be lona le tla bua ke bitsa wena mo yo hallang ke bitsa wena moya me misupa wena moya wa ka haro le hodimo wena metsi moya wa lewatle wona moya wa kometsing wona moya wa gotlong tsene tsa lefatshe ke bitse wena Jehova ya etsang tsohle wena ya re bopileng mopi wa rona ka lebitso la le matla Jesu Kriste thokozani camako makhosi thokoza amen. So I hope we managed to capture that. Okay, I'm going to keep my hands steady too. I'm here. Let me sing because I can. Bingelela nonke mzini kababa 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 bingele. Yanu get the first part, the second part together. So nyan bingelela lesedi ganya ka le dumedisa bongkholo bontatemolo kaofela that are watching manyelwe kaofela diaqamakusha kubonke abantu abadala izinyanya zonke amathonga wonke kuyadumedisa kaofela bokuku le borramogolo bone ba re file botshelo pula ene thokozani okoko nabomkhulu kuba bonke abantu abadala. So I have done an elaborate greeting, and as you guys can see, I've wrapped up my cloth ibe polo neck, right? Get lala today because it's freezing. But what inspired the outfit today is very much the topic. And the topic today is the LGBTQI plus community and spirituality. Now, for lack of a better word, I'm just going to use, because I can't keep terming it like that. Terming it like that. I'm just going to say the gay community, all right? I know that there is a lot of people, lots of different sects within the LGBTQI plus community, but I'm going to start with gay because gay, I think, for most of us was the first recognition, was the first time we learned of anybody who is living outside of the constructs of what they were born as, right? I don't know about everybody else, but the first thing that I knew about the LGBTQI plus community was hearing that people, were gay. So I'm going to use that term to sort of explain as we go. I know it's a very controversial topic. I know that we have our own viewpoints, but I want them as well as all spirits to be engaged, and more so, as I was saying, to a lot of you guys who've actually contacted me on the side, we're still going to have a lot of higher level questions, and part of those questions being answered will rely on the foundation, right? And the foundation, this is part of the foundation, right? Because we see it happening. We have our own judgments, right? So I think I'm going to try to present it the way that I feel it should be presented, right? A lot of you guys will agree and or disagree with me, right? So I want to start with the analogy that I always give. And I'm finding it so much that more and more each week, this analogy it's like it's seeping into me. The analogy is when God sat on its own prior to creation, God being all-knowing, lacking nothing, needing nothing, having everything of itself through whatever, I don't know, we can't say the millions or billions of years, through the time-space continuum which we have developed today on earth. When God spent time on itself, with itself, God knew that by itself it had the power and the capability to become anything. However, God, knowing that it had this capability and this power, was not enough. God chose to experience itself, right? So how does God, or how does our source experience itself, right? I mean, let's just say if we could create a yardstick. I mean, I know that eternity is a very long time, but at what point did our creator, did the source, decide to choose to experience itself in a physical, tangible form? We really don't know, right? So this means that the source was comfortable in darkness, lived within its own devices. Hence Genesis, Genesis speaks about God saying, let there be light. It means that before there was light, there always was a God. And we don't know when God chose to create the light. The light was simply a polarity created, that all that God chooses to experience itself as will have context. So what the Creator did was say, I will divide myself into differentiations of me in equal parts, in equal ways, that I may experience myself, the I am, in whichever way, making use of the archetypes. I'm going to explain this. I'm going to explain archetypes just now. Making use of archetypes that I may remember that I am divine. what are archetypes? And again, the archetype ke eng? If the universe was a TV, the archetypes would be the channels that DSTV or any other network. The archetypes could also be the sound waves. The archetypes could be the screen itself, the light on the screen, because scientifically or it's light screening through the pixels. So the archetypes are the background programs. Here's a good example of one of the fundamental background programs. And this is a universal one. Some are universal, others are relative to Earth, others are relative to the systems in the world, and then saying they are relative to each animal. And then, well, we are animals too, so I guess the archetypes. Molefatsing, our biggest archetype, if we had to characterize it, right? Science reveals gravity, so it's Newton's law. But gravity is thing molefatsing for our convenience, right? And science is not found another place where there's gravity. So we could say gravity is an archetype of the planet Earth. It's a characteristic. It's a personality. We say Mother Earth. That is an archetype because we are defining the Earth firstly in a human form and then secondly as a woman, right? Clearly we're trying to say the Earth is a nurturing spirit, right? And that's funny because throughout history and the world, the Earth is not all that nurturing, right? However, we still continue Earth, Mother Earth. An archetype ya mudimu is khomita ntate mudimu. An archetype of the Holy Spirit is to say it is the protector, it is the comforter. Therefore, we are indirectly giving the Holy Spirit a maternal spirit. There are the archetypes everywhere, right? Feminism is an archetype. Masculinity is an archetype. So many things. Even within the archetype of feminism, many other things. Maternal feminism. Individual or personality or career-oriented feminism. Revolutionary feminism. Right? So, what I'm trying to say, when you are born with a clear slate, technically. But because of the nine months that we all spent in our mother's womb, we have already acquired certain archetypes. Firstly, the sound of our mother's voice becomes the sound of comfort. Whatever else that we acquire, the vibrations of her soul, of her voice, they've kept us for 9 months. So the moment we leave that place, thing in our mother's wombs, which is so interesting, we automatically, from the time of labor of our mothers until the time we are born, we acquire a lot of archetypes. Because the archetype of fear is only developed in that time. However, the archetype of survival, right, the program to survive and to feel alone in the world is also clear to us in that moment. So when we are born, we acquire a lot of archetypes. And then first 3 years, even psychology says that, right? 3 to 5 years. That's where now our mother's breasts, and we get to spiritually meet with the people around her, right? Her family, her badimu, her associates, her lifestyle. We get to experience our mother's lifestyles and our parents' lifestyles, even from a time morusaboning, right? So the archetypes is like so many, and they start to run in the background, and we're not even aware of them, right? Like we are not aware that we breathe in. We think that who's this? Who mailing a pornography link to my group? But who? To my page? Hey, you. So that's what we do, right? We acquire a lot of archetypes. We can say most of them are pushed on us from a physical level, because at that time harena any choice from a human point of view, but from a spiritual point of view of God choosing to differentiate itself through you, to you, for itself, for God to choose to do that, it means that even the archetypes that the God in us, or us being God, or God calling us, is one that is clearly mapped out, right? That is why Jesus's mission, according to the Bible, was clearly from day one. He said, I am here to die. Okay. And yeah, I'm here to die. So that was the archetype. That was the demonstration that Jesus chose. An archetype, you only align with it when you feel as a soul, as a spirit, that it will help you to best demonstrate who you are. Because remember, you are the differentiation of God that chooses to experience itself in whichever way. Right? So, those are archetypes. And today I did a bit of research. For being gay, I already spoke about that, is not unique to the modern world. Apparently, a corpse, a man, a transgender man, believed to be transgender man, was found in the Czech Republic. Okay, and this corpse is said to be at least 3,000 years old. They said it's 2,900 max, but because of the time-space continuum, I think they're struggling to find out when exactly that was. But what is interesting is that that corpse was lay on its side with the head facing the east, and on the other side, like on the side of its supposed breast, it had pottery and utensils and things typically associated with women. So apparently, for archaeologists, how they differentiated that corpse to what a male corpse would be, is that the male corpses had sharp knives, things like that. But the corpse was found to have the DNA of a man, right? So this would typically be your transgender corpse. I read also over the week that they were, I think it was two, I don't think it's pharaohs, because they were working under the pharaoh and after Tutankhamun, so I forgot that dude's name. And there are early Egyptian depictions also around 3,000 years ago BC, where these two males were touching noses, and apparently touching noses was equivalent to kissing. So perhaps, not even perhaps, it's clear, right? There are many cultures in history that have shown that men have, or even women, have gotten together in a sexual nature. And it's not something that is starting now, as much as we would like to believe that it is. Now, what was interesting about what I read is that in the Czech Republic, the people back then, they associated a transgender person to have divine spiritual power, which is so interesting, right? I don't know how they came to this conclusion, but it looks like more and more, from what I have seen, there is some truth to that. All right, so that was quite interesting. Okay, so let's speak to the people that are not pro LGBTQI plus gay people. I've read a few arguments on ancestral groups, just on social media, where people will say, what would happen if every man and every woman decided to be homosexual? Then it means that our future generations would perish, right? That's typically the argument from a Genesis place, by the way, right? From a Genesis place, and from, I guess, a place of nature, that hoba gay, lesbian, is an abomination, because now primarily the Bible yone is sabatling. Primarily the Bible yone is sabatling, right? With the two kings that served under the Egyptian pharaoh, they both had their wives and they had children, and they still decided to have a relationship. Jonathan in the Bible and David had a very close relationship, to a point that when David found out that Jonathan had died, he went into mourning. Right? I know it sounds like blasphemy, I know, but I'm here to provoke you guys. There are many texts in the Bible, I think, they keep us wondering, but not only in Africa, in the world, it has never been an issue for the spiritualist to understand that Mudimu creates things as they should. True, the gay people back then, right? So they would still fulfill their duties. They would still fulfill their duties with regard to marriage or whatever, and furthering future generations. So, but let us say now, or we look at this argument, or what would happen if every man and every woman slept with one another? The answer is actually almost simple. Or I'll present two possible answers. If you look at the Genesis Adam, before he had Eve removed from his rib, what was he? Eve is significantly different. Okay, Snana Samontle. Okay, could blend in le Adam, because on the outside, well, men and women are not very different. right? But did Adam have ovaries? Did he have breasts? Was Adam maybe the first transgender? I mean, if a portion of him was being removed to create a completely different gender, it means nothing was added in there, right? It means that nothing was added in there. God simply did an operation on Adam, right? And I'm not saying that, like I'm saying, I'm not trying to sound blasphemous, right? I will say, though, gore mythology has it that before Eve, God had created Adam another wife called the Lilith, but we'll speak about that one day, right? Because Lilith was like modern day Slay Queen. She knew herself. But from just the depiction of the Bible, right, where now one being is separated into another, we must remember now, for us, when we say that it is God differentiating itself, it means that God, as Lerato, chose to differentiate itself as a black woman. Right. Schowa was an archetype program that I went. My parents paid for me to get that program. Okay. So, from a spiritual place, Mudimu is neither male or female. And we love to say this when we refer to the Bible. But when we address our fellow man, we have an issue with the way that they appear outside. But okay, let me not waste a lot of time on foundational questions, all right? I want to get straight to the teaching. If you really think about it, there are many, many, many instances where our gender is a question to us. If you guys remember, a few weeks back, I did the characteristics of Moprofita, right? And Moprofita back then, when I did the characteristics, was not defined to male or female. And actually, if we as prophets were to look back at the characteristics of Moprofita, I think we would find very little to actually, to look down upon. But anyway, let's just say the analogy ya gore yaanong if monno mong le mong le mosadi o mong le mong a ka ba homosexual, re tlo bereka yang? That is almost equal as saying if every white person were to have sex with only themselves and black people simply didn't, what would happen? It makes absolutely no sense, right? It makes absolutely no sense. Half of the things that we like to draw reference to, particularly to be able to cast down or to look down upon certain people, really have got no real basis. Firstly, we're not just white people and black people in the world, or rather in South Africa, we've got colored people. What would happen to them, right? Because they're a mixture of black and white. So I think that it's absolutely something that we need to look into and search our hearts, and search ourselves to decide what really needs our attention. And orientation has been a really hectic thing. I know throughout history, in most African states, it's been punishable. Some places it hasn't been. It's funny. I think it was in Mali that I read that it was not punishable, or rather it was not recognized, or it was not observed, so it was not punishable. And I think it was the same in most states. It was not punishable. So that's my take. At the end of the day, we can't speak about them from an evolutionary point of view, because the law of Darwinism says that we evolved from a rock. The law of Darwinism does not speak anything about people or modern day, whatever, Homo sapiens, or no, not even modern day, our earlier versions of ourselves needing to copulate, to have sex through the ages. If we were moving or evolving from a place of a rock into the seas and whatever, and evolution, it means that with each life form, we managed to copulate as we could. And nature on its own does recognize hermaphrodites, right? The thing, right? So being transgender or being gay, lesbian is nothing new to nature. It's nothing new to nature. It's something that we have chosen to differentiate, or to be able to differentiate one another. But that on its own is a lack mentality, because that mentality is a mentality that puts one at a particular place preceding another, which is ridiculous, because we are all actually differentiations of the same God choosing to experience itself. Right. So what I started to notice was a lot of gay people are spiritually inclined, right? And I saw this early in my life. I know, how early could it have been? I'm so young. I've always been drawn to gay and lesbian people. And I always end up in very strange situations. I got stalked a couple of years back by a lesbian lady, but that's a story for another day. One of my great best friends was visibly gay from school. I mean, this guy tried to date girls. Even I couldn't see him with a woman, and he tried, right? He tried. And throughout my life, for some reason, I've managed to connect with gay people, for lack of a better word. And one thing I found consistent, this one I think we should learn from them. And this is actually the crux of today's teaching. If you think about how we as individuals or prophets struggle with the I am, struggle with knowing who we are, it's so interesting that we struggle with our identity, having clear borders or lines of who we are, having clearly knowing our race, clearly knowing our gender, clearly knowing where we come from, yet we struggle. I think it's very interesting that it's like our struggle for the soul identity. It is a struggle that happens where all the archetypes are supposed to be in line. How do I, as Lerato being a woman, a straight woman, how do I struggle with my identity when I am married to a man, or I live with a man? I have children. I have born children. So I've used my uterus. I have had an opportunity to go to school. I've used my intellect. I have had the opportunity to learn certain things, right? I have 2 legs. I have 2 arms. So I can't even define myself as disabled. I'm mentally sound. How did I manage as Lerato to lose who I am? How did I manage to get lost in all these programs? Programs that are supposed to assist me, programs that I chose, directly or indirectly. How did these programs end up pushing me to a point where now my endowed spirit was taking over and I was suicidal? Do we see that the perfect order of life was never meant to be in a linear pattern, in a linear way, going from left to right? Because to the average person in the street, I have everything. So what could my problem be, right? My problem was a soul problem. And basically, some of those archetypes had worn out. It was the end of their program. Some of those archetypes, I chose them subconsciously, and I was frustrated with them towards that because I didn't realize that they were there to help me. Some of them, I simply felt I couldn't align with them. Some of them represented my past fears. Some of them represented the person I wanted to create in my mind. Some of them represented what I saw in the world. The image. I started to create an image called Lerato ke mang. So the image of Lerato in my mind's eye is a combination of all these archetypes. Now, what does this have to do with gay people? From day one, I don't know from what time, and when I say day one, I mean from the time that they start to feel that something is different. Already, it is like they're having an archetype. We could even go as far as to say it is endowed spirit that drives them to behave in a way that makes them stick out like a sore thumb. And in every way, in as much as they would try to align with the archetypes of the world, with the archetypes that they want to connect with, for some reason, they are anomalies to themselves. For some reason, they are a problem to themselves. So what most gay and lesbian LGBTQI people experience, by the time we go Rilo Twasa, that's when we start to really experience it. But with them, from that moment, it has been slowly releasing itself. And whether the archetype, or rather, whether the mindset is something is wrong with me, or something is wrong with the world, the interpretation to a soul, to a human soul, is always the same. How do I get away from it? Right? How do I change it so that I can conform? How do I become the thing that people expect me to be and be functional? So I believe these people, Baba spiritual, because they're the first to have endow spirit type of experience that always brings them out, shows them that they don't fit in, right? And I'm going to hopefully one day tie why we have to feel like we are alone in the world, right? This spirit, whatever it is, call it a faulty archetype if you want to, right? It starts to come up and it says something is different. And it's so interesting. We, the straight people, up until Ritwasa, we are willing to swallow it. Or something's wrong with me. Something's different about me. And I don't know what it is. We are willing to swallow it to a point that this archetype turns itself into endowed spirit and starts to consume you, because that's what endowed spirit is meant to do. It's meant to push you into negative karma whenever you do not move in alignment of the spirit, your soul purpose. Whenever we don't move into our soul purpose, then it is the responsibility of the God in you to break whatever archetype, to break whatever thing you told yourself to be able to conform. It's the only way we'll go back to God. Right? So these people, they experience this from very young. And I think for them, they have managed, or they must create a community where they can maybe team up. Right? There is such a phrase as gay. But it doesn't make it any easier. I don't know about most spiritual leaders, healers. I could not find any connection. I cried for weeks with beads on my hands because I had no idea what I was becoming. And what was terrible is that I had no idea what was wrong with me. So on one side, I'm running away from a disease of myself. And at the same time, I'm running away from the fear of what I'm becoming. Can you imagine experiencing this from childhood, from teenagehood? It must be a terrible feeling. And we lack empathy, right? And we lack seeing that in our spirit from a universal place. Okay. LGBTQI plus people in general, now I believe they would be more aligned to Istunya and your white endowed spirits. Not because abanalo idlozi likhona. Right? However, I have said this before, that what I often see with Abangoma is that Abangoma spirits have got a clear identification of who they are, by the way. Badimu don't want to dictate who you are. They're not interested in that. They want to clearly define who they are to you, right? And that is why you're finding women who say they've got male clothes, right? And female clothes. And that, I think one day we're going to talk about that too. Badimu are not about defining to you who you are. They're bringing their personalities, their life lessons from this world into the next. That's what they're bringing here. They are not bringing a prejudice. However, I do feel it would be easier for people in the LGBTI plus Q, in the gay community, to connect with water sea spirits. Why? Umnikazi always depicts itself as a man first and then as a woman. To some, as a woman, Divine Mother, Virgin Mary, and then later as her son. It was very interesting earlier on when I started to do readings. I would hear people say that Umnikazi would say, I would hear Abantu coming for readings with dream interpretations and say, I dream of this man who keeps coming to me and then eventually asks me to go and meet his mom. And always I say to them, the mother is actually the one who sent for you. The mother is the true Umnikazi. And Umnikazi is his mother. Just like the god, the sun god Ra and his daughter Sekhmet, a mother-daughter, son lover. Spirituality does not have the divisions. It doesn't have the cleared lines. Spirituality, even from a Hindi point of view, says that Brahma says he is every level of life in itself, with itself, of itself. So in Hindi, Brahma would be equally gratified being a dog as being a pine cone on a pine tree. Right? So if you look at the world of the spiritual world, particularly in the water world, there is neither male nor female. And I think that this is something that I think most people within the LGBTQI community should consider, especially when they need to twasa, they should look into first. Yes, we could assume that they've got female dlozis. I mean, it makes rational sense for us to say that, because we assume that women with male dlozis act in a masculine way. But that's not necessarily the point, actually. Right? I believe we are all a mix of masculine and feminine. The proportion will be different because of what your dlozi is trying to align you with. And ultimately, what Sidimo Sago is trying to align you with is also an archetype. What they are doing is they are refining certain archetypes, maybe helping you to outgrow them, and then helping you to call forward new ones. And as you call forward new ones, then they will attract other ones, and they will attract also Ndao spirits. Right? So it's not enough to just say, no, you would be lesbian or gay because you've got, the opposite gender. I don't think it's really limited to that. Because I feel the dlozi has got no real interest in experiencing itself. Well, it's possible. Maybe the dlozi does have an interest in experiencing itself as an opposite gender. But why could it do that? Why not, as a male dlozi, simply go to a female family member? Right? I feel that idlozi particularly connects with the water spirits, and where now you, the host, become now your own host, by the way, to your own dlozi. I'm going to say this in closing. I recently had a very interesting thought. Not recently, actually, when I started to trust them. When I started to see my spirit guides, Badimu back in my dreams, when I looked at Ugogo Kandalembube, she looked like such a familiar person, but there was no physical picture of someone like her. Even when I described her to my mother's side, no one knew her. So I never got a dlozi who could be validated by someone else. And my second and third dlozis, when they came Twaza as well, they initially never gave me names, their names. They never even gave me spirit names. They just came and left and did what they needed to do. So, I mean, I was stuck with Badimu that I thought, Togozan, who are these people? When my first dlozi, my gogo Kandalembube told me that she was Umamchali. I struggled to explain it to my grandmother, Hore, Gumamchali Ganjani. Because Umchali was my maternal grandmother's surname. So Umchali Ushatwe Gamakubets. So who is this? Did this mean that I was tossing my great grandmother's mother before she got married? Or was I tossing her mother who was married Wamchali? I never got answers. Until one day, ugogo said to me, what if through every lifetime you have been coming and going, taking up different positions in the history of your family, taking up different roles in the history of your family. What if I am you and you are me? What if you are the 1987 version of whatever? She was 4 generations up of those generations back. And it got me thinking, what if idlozi lami was me from the past coming into the future to assist me, that I may create another future for my me, and in that future create a further future? What if I have chosen to come back, maybe say every 3rd generation? I mean, what happens to all the souls when we die? Yes, we become idlos, but idlozi generally, I don't know for other people, is normally limited to 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 spirit guides who come and work through you. What happens to the millions of generations? What happens to them? What if kirona nzeribuwa over and over? Right? So, and if you think about it, the purpose of a water gift, the purpose, yes, tunya, I said this some time back, is tunya sisebenza in the divine moment of now. This tunya gahle gahle, we can't really quantify ukuthi sivela kuphi, nokuthi siya kuphi, nokuthi sisebenza kanjani. We can say ukuthi isithunya works through the Bible, but actually not. Isithunya works through any religion, not even religion, any belief system. So even when we believed gore modimo ke kgomo ya nko e metsi, go ne go tshwanetse go bana le isithunya and go ne go tshwanetse go bana le mundao. So bane ba tswa kae yaka today re phagamisa isithunya ka kereke? Right? And maybe isithunya is the previous us. Maybe it's our past lives. And we keep on coming back. Now, what does this have to do with gay people? Maybe they have decided to pave the way for a better future. If unagana di revolutions and how we came from, not even from Goleta Mulo with rocks, and how we even evolved from rocks, right? And eventually industrialization and all of that. Socrates, by the way, is said to be one of the gay people. If we came from those places, how did we get the intellect to be able to start creating what we have been slowly creating, if not for the fact that we come, we live, we die, we go back, we do an assessment and an application, and we come back and we live and we die and we do an assessment or an application. Perhaps these people, in as much as, I mean, like we would say, where do the gay people batwa suddenly? We like to say that. You know. Where did white people come from suddenly? You know. Where did South Africans come from suddenly? Because more in the Khoikhoi and the San people. And it is through their paving their way. We don't know what they are paving for, right? In the cosmic moment of now. Maybe we will have isithunya esi bisexual. And if you think about who God is, that Tunya would probably be the most accurate depiction of Mudim. Because God is neither male nor female. So I think that we should really look at each other from a divine space. God is an amazing being. And each and every one of us is a differentiation of the most brilliant entity throughout. You can't even say throughout history, throughout, period. And we get to be here on this earth and play around with the concept of our godliness and experience it and define and redefine God. And I think that's why last week I was saying, most of us, it is through the conditioning of the mind and the conditioning of religions and the conditioning of archetypes. Archetypes created by us. Right. Archetypes that could be destroyed by us. It's so sad, or it's so interesting, that it is through this conditioning that we have taught ourselves to find ourselves as isolated beings. Each and every one of us, should know that when you close your eyes and you see the next person, that person is you. You could create, you could imagine, you could create a spirit body for them if you like. Because Boporofeta is connecting, Libungaka is connecting to the spirit body of God. That's how we can pick up the Tabatabatu. The source is one. So you could create an image, whichever image you like, for all of the spirit bodies that you see around you every day. But imagine how your life would be when you walked down the street and all the people driving their cars, wearing their suits, Babereka in the contractor nearby, Babereka in the shop, go pick and pay. Everywhere you went. Imagine how your life would be when all of those people looked exactly like you. That would be quite interesting. Because in the spirit world, it is actually like that. In this universe, there's only one us. There's only one me. There's only one you. This entire universe, you see me walking down the street, but I am a depiction of you because you are God. I am a reflection of you. I am a way that you chose to experience yourself. And you thought to yourself today, or you chose to consider me walking down the street in a red dress as a separate entity, but actually not. You chose this. I chose this. We chose this. So I hope that's going to give us a lot of context, particularly with gay, lesbian people. It's not only about the Dlozi, because the question, Dlozi ke mang? Yesterday I had an interesting chat with a lady, Gogo Lerato, and she was telling me about the history of Mandao. And that Mandao, most of them, they come from Malawi and that. But at the end of the day, question is, Mandawa, must they be there? Must they be there? Must they be Mandawa Abuang Sindao? And who decided that they must speak Sindao? Why can't Mandao speak Chinese? Right? So I think we should connect with everything around us and remember that everything around us is just beautiful. What was that?